Wow, I cannot but be thankful to our God for not only giving himself a ransom for all to be testified in due time, he offered salvation by grace through faith so that someone who is sinful, vile, and defiled, like every single one of us was, is able to be justified by the grace of God, given eternal life and direction that you could never gain in 100 lifetimes. God has given us the wisdom that's from above in this book, and I'm so thankful for it, and thankful for a platform to be able to talk about some of these things. Now, I recommend as families, and even if you are thinking of having a family, or even if you're thinking you don't even know what you're thinking, knowing this book, finding out characters, look at how God shows examples of men, families, women, and rulers of nations, and deconstruct those lives. Take the examples that God gave. He gives details, and he wasn't just saying, oh, I need some fluff. Let me put this in here. Everything in here details about people. Know those things and know them like the back of your hand, or even better. Because the more you know this book, the more connections you can make, and it's profitable on the life that now is and of that which is to come. So it's never a vain thing knowing this book more, deconstructing it and realizing, say, hey to yourself, you know what? I've had issues with this, or these temptations come after me. Let me find someone in the Bible that ran into the same things and how they went down or how they succeeded, and you're going to find a success story that you could take God's power of his word, and his spirit will work that information into your life, and you can become that man of God, that woman of God that can be fitly framed together. Now, let me set my alarm on my clock. Well, I guess I should. Yeah. Let me set my timer. 45 seconds? That's too short. Okay, I'm going to get lost in technology in here. I'm going to be all confused. So, all right, I'm going to look at a few things regarding the family. And when you think about families, nations, what are they made up of? They're made up of tribes, just like the nation Israel. That nation was made up of tribes. It was made up of families. And who was the head of those families? God established men to be the head of those families. So if you wanted to disrupt that nation, what do? You start attacking the foundation. You don't go starting blowing the leaves off the top of the trees. That's that's not very productive. But what you do, you start going to that axe laid to the root of the tree. There it goes. You start damaging the foundation, and Satan would be a fool if he didn't use those tactics, and he does use those tactics. All right, if you want to take your Bible, and even if you don't want to, I recommend taking it. Go to Isaiah chapter 33. Isaiah 33, and we look at the times that we're living in today, and you look out there, and if you didn't know better, you'd think it's like an insane asylum run by the inmates. The problem is there's too much order. It's not just chaotic. There's order, and there's a destructive order working, being subversive in this world, and it's working off a blueprint. And when we can identify that blueprint, see it, and prepare ourselves and fortify ourselves against it, we're not going to fall victim to that thing again. All right, Isaiah 33, look with me at verse number 6. Here is the solution in time past, and it just happens to be the solution today. Isaiah 33, 6. And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. So what brings the stability of the times? Wisdom and knowledge, and it's that wisdom and knowledge of this book. It's the wisdom of God given to us. Now, I want to open with a word of prayer, and then we'll look at the rest of these passages. God, I do not doubt that every single one of us came here. We want to be vessels fit for the Master's use. We want to be fitly framed for thy service. We pray that you can give us understanding, and may our hearts be submissive to your word. No matter how it rubs us, may we by faith believe it and turn our cats around so that we can be in union with your will and with your word for the greater glory of God now and in the world that is to come. For Christ Jesus' glory and sake we pray. Amen. All right. If you turn over to 1 Corinthians 14. Well, you don't have to go there. You're probably familiar with it. But 1 Corinthians 14:40, it talks about things being done decently and in order. And your decisions in life, I heard a guy say it, and I agree with it. He said, your decisions in life are only as good as the information you've been given. You know what? If God gave us a little magazine, then here's the magazine of truth for you. Now mine, of course, it has a blank page, so it looks larger than normal. But for God to be able to condense the wisdom and direction for humanity from time past, now, and ages to come, he condensed it within something you can carry around. You don't even need to put it on a wheelbarrow or something. Is phenomenal, but it's the wisdom of God, and he's given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. The information that he's given us is information by which we can make wise decisions and to be able to strengthen and preserve our understanding. Now, Brother Adam, he mentioned a bunch of the verses, so I'm still going to go to him because I learned by repetition. And sometimes men need to be told twice. Moses, and all that kind of stuff. So I learn by repetition, and it never hurts to hear those things again. But I'm glad that we do have a spiritual collusion. And it's this book. It's the wisdom from God. Now, over in, we're going to look at about families. I'm not just going to make up some stuff arbitrarily, but we're going to look at a family. We're going to narrow in, and we're going to look at the family of Lot. And we're going to see some things that he did, choices he made that were not wise choices, and they're the same choices that every one of us today are facing as well. Now, if you want to turn your Bible, well, Brother Adam already hit it. In Genesis 18:19, Abraham was going to command his children. And if you remember when Lot got taken away, all this stuff got run off with, Abraham took his trained servants, born in his own house, he went out and recovered all. Just like David, when they burned Ziklag and ran off with his stuff, he came back and they wept till they had no more power to weep. I haven't been in that position, but that's what he did. He pursued faint yet pursuing, and David recovered all. So Satan don't want you to recover things. If you've made mistakes, God's word can make it so you can recover. You can get things back that maybe you lost. You can start redeeming the time. And these things are for learning and admonition. So instead of being weak in the Lord and not having a foundation, when Eve was tempted, here comes Satan, come to Eve in Genesis 3, she should have said, go ask Adam. Just take all that blame, just put it right over to the head, you go ask him. That would have been a wonderful thing. But instead, you look at what happens after the fall. Adam didn't say, it was my fault. Like what Brother Adam mentioned, he didn't say, I did wrong here, and I didn't hearken to what you taught me. Instead, the woman. And then the woman says, the serpent. And they're pointing fingers. They should have just said, me. I didn't follow what you told me to do, and it's my fault. And if you take it from that position, you're going to be benefited by the Word of God. All right, take your Bibles over to Genesis chapter 12. We're going to look at the tale of two tents. And we're going to look at Abram, and we look at Lot. And what's unique in Genesis chapter 12, I have to be very watchful of the time and observant of it because it'd be easy to take too much time here. But in Genesis 12, Abram gets called out. When God calls Abram, he says, get thee out of thy father's house and the land I'll tell thee. And Abram didn't say, not so, Lord. But what are the words that came out of Lot's mouth? Lot, he gets information from God, flee out of the city. He says, oh, not so, my Lord. So here's the difference. You have a heart of Abram believing what God said, and you got the heart of Lot. He wants to do it his way. Oh, not so, Lord. And like Peter, does it even make sense? Not so, Lord. If you're correcting him, he's not your Lord. So again, what is he doing? He's usurping the authority. Instead of being that man under authority, he's trying to be over that authority. So Genesis chapter 12, and look with me at verse number 8. This is the heart of Abram, right from the start. He says, remove thee hence, or remove from hence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. Now, if we looked at a map, a lot of those Holy Land maps, they're not where things really occurred. So, do I know for certain where Ai is? I'm not sure. Even if I didn't have a map, I just have the printed page, and I don't know where that is. God specifically says that Ai is on the east, and Bethel, the house of God, is on the west. So when you look at satanic organizations like the Masonic organization, they want people to go east, 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 east. Have you been to the east, east? What happened when Adam and Eve sinned against God? In their rebellion and their condemnation and correction from God, they go out of the blessing of God to the east. That garden, eastward Eden, they went out east, and it was under God's judgment, his condemnation. So right away, Abram is associated with Bethel, the house of God. He's obedient to the cry of God, and he's concerned about it. And as this is going on, as they come and they had a division between Abram had a bunch of stuff and Lot had a bunch of stuff, and they were starting to be divided, and Abram gives Lot the opportunity. He says, you just pick which side and I'll take the other one. So what did Lot do? He goes, Lord, help me to make a wise decision. No. He just comes out there. This is what I want. He looked with the eyes. What did Joshua do? The Gibeonites, they worked wildly. They said, you know what? We can't stand. Jericho went down. We're not anything close to Jericho. The Ai went down where those men came out and they subverted them, and then they finally got them and burned the city. We don't have that ability. So what are we going to do? Let's work wildly. Let's get some old shoes and some rotten bread, come up with this great story, and say we're some of our country. It's so far. Look at our shoes are worn, and our bread is all moldy. And they were just from a near country, but they lied. And Joshua asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. He used these only, and what happened? He was deceived. He was subverted. The Gibeonites took him in their own craftiness because he asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. So when Abram is communing with God, after they have this division, you've got where God is dealing with Abraham. He's dealing before him. He's getting the covenant and blessings. He's learning at how through Abram, how all families of the earth are going to be blessed versus Lot's descendants. Descended from your own daughters, Ammon and Moab. And you look at that whole history of death and destruction and misery, and you look through Abraham, what's his? In thee, all families of the earth are going to be blessed. You look at Abram and Abraham, you look at Lot, and you're like, I don't like what Lot did. How did Lot get to that position? So from Genesis 12 all the way you get up to Genesis 19, God is dealing with Abram and Abraham, making this covenant with him. So he says let's look at verse number 19. Genesis 19 and verse number 1. The two angels come to Lot, and they come down to Sodom, and he says, Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Now, instead of sitting before like Abram and Abraham was doing before God, getting instruction from God, Lot, number one, he pitched his tent towards Sodom. That was the first thing that he did. He saw that it was well watered, and he was a ways away. But what happened is, after a while, he just naturally gravitated down, and he's sitting. You see him, he has tent pitched towards Sodom, and before you know it, he's in the gate, and he's living in Sodom right there in the downtown area of the city. So he says, the angels came and went to meet with him. Verse number 2, and behold, now thy lords, turn in, I pray thee. So Lot is telling him, the angels to turn in, because he knows what goes on in Sodom. And those men, which he says men, in verse number 1, angels, and then verse number 10, he explains who those angels were. He says, but the men put forth their hand, pulled Lot into the house. So anyway, he says, don't abide out in the street all night. And then so he had them in, and they had a feast. Verse number 3, look at 4. Before they lay down, the men of that city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round about, both old and what? You know what? Today, there is an attack on the young. Because the young grow up, and they can be fortified by the power of God, or they can grow up and be corrupted and be erring in judgment and making bad decisions and be very destructive in their lifestyle. So they encompassed the whole house round about, young and old, people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. Now, the Bible is being very discreet, and it's talking about what was going on with Adam and Eve knowing his wife. And this is corruption and villainous activity. And this is what they do. It comes natural to them. So it's just reading about this is just horrible. So it's a great manifestation, though, of what this stuff is able to do. It's able to go down to depths that you would say, no way, it took me there. I willingly made those decisions. I compromised myself to this position. And you know what? It's easy to do. Lot did it. He saw it. It's easy. It's well watered. I don't have to sit there and hoe so hard and try to bring water around. Everything is just well watered and flourish. It's just, that's where it's at. It's at bed of ease. Now, I'm not against having a great house. If you have great lands, that's all wonderful. But if people start looking and say, the great lands and the great house is more valuable than my precious family or God's truth, you're going the wrong direction. You need to be very, very careful of that. Better is a little with the righteous than that great spoil. When in, I think it's Mark 8:36, what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And thinking of that regarding what a family is, that is the most valuable and important thing that you have. And sowing into them the right things and being that living epistle and example is extremely important. All right. Some things about Lot. The decisions that he made that weren't right, you don't have to go there, but in Jeremiah 10:23, it said, it is not in man to direct his steps. So, like what Brother Adam mentioned, where do we get direction for our steps? From the guidebook, the manual, and this is it. In Abram, Nahor, and then Haran, they headed out of there. Lot came out of Ur of the Chaldees. When Abram said, Assyrian was my father and ready to perish, he came out of some really dark stock. He came out of some things that those nations had given themselves over to idolatry. God pulled out one man, Abram, and had a plan for him and fulfilled it through him. All right. In Genesis 13, look with me back to Genesis 13. Here it gives a little bit of a definition of what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot went down there to the south, it says, but look at number 11. It says, Lot shows him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated unto themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. And look at 13. Now, of course, I mentioned before, chapter 13, verse 13, and it has 13 words. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. So right away, I would think, what's going on down in that city? Am I willing to bring my children down to that city? That's something that would be really important to think about. And it doesn't seem like Lot really cared about that because he saw the riches, the ease, it's easy. But if you take your Bible and want to learn about Sodom and what happened to it, take your Bible and read where God mentions Sodom and get an education. You see a term in the Bible, grab your Bible, read where God uses that term, and you get educated. You get understanding that this world doesn't have. So what happened in, it's Ezekiel 16, I think it's 49, where God says, behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. Here it comes. What got Sodom and Gomorrah? What led them down that slippery path down to where they're wanting to do horrible stuff to angels that came to minister to Lot and to have them come out of there? What happened? The first thing was pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness. Neither were they thankful. They became haughty. Does that ring a bell in Romans chapter 1? Neither were they thankful. They became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. And that darkness is a darkness that pretty much it could be felt. And I think every one of us are feeling it to an extent in this world. It's a darkness that's settling, but you know what? It's a darkness that the light of the glorious gospel of Christ can overcome. Where sin abounded, yes, sin abounding. Grace did much more abound. There is a solution, and it's this book. So what happened? Those men of Sodom, what did they do? They had the pride, fullness of bread. They were self-reliant, like we saw on that list last night. They had that 1 John 2:15. They had the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And they yielded their members to it and went down so low that the solution for that was the autoclave from heaven came down and purified and sanctified Admah, Zeboam, Sodom and Gomorrah, and those other cities about them that were doing those things in like manner. He said he took them away as he saw good. And the way he took them away was just like when he took that flood in Genesis 6. They all ate, they drank, they married, they builded, and they knew not till the flood came and took them all away. Those things are very helpful, since in the news media going on with those horrible catastrophes in North Carolina and Kentucky, some of them, many of those people, they had no idea what was coming. They didn't even think of preparing in that way. Who would think that the water level is going to go 40 feet higher than it's ever done historically? I probably wouldn't think that. But the flood came and took those people away. And it's great to be able to use not as something to joy or revel in, but just like those horrible thing that happened to those men and women and children through that disaster, there's a disaster coming, there's a judgment coming, and just like God, when he took those people away, there's a judgment before God, and people don't need to go there unprepared. They can be ready. All right. If you go with me back over to Genesis 19. Now, if you remember before this what was going on, Abraham knew that Lot went down that direction. And I would think when Abraham said to God, when he heard God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he says, he starts, what he's doing, he's Abrahaming him down. He takes him from 50 all the way down to 10, and he must have thought for sure Lot has turned a few people to righteousness. Because it said that he had Lot, he had his 2 daughters that had not known men, and then he had at least 2 daughters that had son-in-laws. Maybe he had some other children, but he at least had 4 children. And then you see, as he's down in Lot and down in Sodom, what they were doing, they were learning the way of the heathen. And when you look at the nation Israel, I think it's in Psalm 106, they mingled among the heathen, and all the heathen got converted, and the heathen, it just all rubbed off on the heathen. It was the other way around. They mingled among the heathen, and they learned the works of the heathen. So when God had the nation Israel going through the land, those heathen were depicting their lifestyle in graphics. They were using graphy. Just like today. How do people learn how to be vile, how to do bad things? There's graphics that portray it. Should we ever allow our eyes to be yielded to look on stuff like that or think? Never. We need to be that casting down imaginations and not muse on anything corrupted or tainted like that. We need to have our eyes fixed and set on the right things. Oh, whoops. Let me turn this thing off. All right, my message has gone over 44 seconds. All right, so Abraham, what did he do? He had his heart set toward God, and Lot didn't. All right, let's look at a few more things regarding Lot's family. Lot, he goes and he's willing to save those men that came. Look at the foolishness that comes out of his mind. God has given us his word that we can abound in knowledge and in all, what? Judgment. The judgment that Lot is displaying, it is so lacking and wanting, it's so destructive, it's hard to even fathom. So let's look and see what he does. He says, verse number 15. No. Okay, well, he takes the angels here. He says verse number 5. No. Okay, look at verse number 8. So Lot goes out and he tells this lustful, raging mob. He opens the door, he says, verse 8, "Behold, I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray thee, bring them out unto you, that ye may do unto them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof." Do you think this tainted, lunatic understanding was going on when he was dwelling with his tent pitched towards Sodom? Probably not. But once he was in Sodom, he was in the culture, he was embracing it, he was engaging in it, his decision-making and his judgments were so tainted, he's willing to give his 2 daughters that hadn't known men, here, give them to the Sodomite raving mob to do what you will with them. You know what happens? Men, women, boys and girls, we don't take heed to this book. We think we're self-sufficient. We don't get our wisdom and understanding from on high. We're going to start making decisions that may not begin as foolish as this, but we're going to go that way. We need to learn from Lot and say, I would never do what Lot did. Wait a minute. Let me see what led Lot to do what he did. And you know what? Every single one of us are being tempted on those same points. They might be a little different, but the whole thing is geared toward the destruction. And we need to look at this and be nuanced and say, aha, I see these wiles, and you know what? With God's glory and his grace and with his compassion on me, I'm not going to go that same way. So anyway, these angels, look at verse 11. They smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great. They wearied themselves to find the door. They didn't weary themselves and say, God, be merciful to me. I'm so wicked, and then now I'm blinded. No, they kept on coming for the door even after they're blinded. Talk about tenacity. If believers would have that kind of tenacity, this world would be different. They're struck with blindness and they keep on pressing on. Like the Apostle Paul, he probably had issues with his eyes. Did he say, well, I'm going to go on sabbatical now. I'm going on early retirement. My eyes aren't as good as I used to. He still pressed toward the mark, maybe tripping on a thing here and there, writing a big letter, had to be maybe bigger writing. He kept on toward that mark. What's that pattern in 1 Timothy 1:16? He said, unto me first Jesus Christ might show forth all long suffering for a pattern to them that should after believe on him to life everlasting. There's wonderful patterns in this book, and there's patterns that you want to avoid at all cost, literally. All right. Now, if you take your Bible and go over to Genesis 34, we're going to look at some more bad decisions that people have made. And some bad decisions that men can make. I'm going to first talk about some things about men, because the whole thing about attacks on the family usually starts with men. And I probably will hit a little bit more about the eyes, but the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Eyes, what goes in men's hearts is very important. What goes in and what doesn't come in. You can see and behold the wonders of God's word with your eyes, and your eye can affect your heart. I think it's Lamentations 3:51. Mine eye affecteth mine heart. It can be a good thing. You look out there and you see the world lost in sin and in trespasses, and you say, you know what? I've got some hope for them. And thanks be to God, the eyes of the Lord Jesus, his eyes affected his heart too. He looked down in Genesis 6 and he saw what was going on. He did something about it. He looks down, Genesis 11, they're building that tower and they're going to do their own thing. He looks down and say, you know what? In my compassion, I'm going to confound their language to slow them down. They're at such a breakneck speed of accelerated demise. I'm going to slow them down for their own extension, their preservation, and he did. So in Genesis 34, we're going to look at someone else that didn't guide or guard his daughter, and the outcome was not good at all. It just spread into more and more problems, and it was not a good thing whatsoever. So in Genesis chapter 34, look with me at verse number 1. 34, verse 1. He says, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. Now, she goes out. It's kind of like today. Well, my children need to experience a college experience. From people I've talked about that were in the college experience, a lot of them ended up the same way that this poor lady did, this young Dinah. She just went out to see the daughters of the land. What are they doing? How do they conduct themselves? What entertainment are they engaged in? And look what happened. She goes out to see the daughters of the land, and when Shechem, the son of Hamath, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her, and his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and he spoke unto his father, said, get this damsel for me to wife. What did he just do? He just took the role of God, completely inverted it. Instead of asking first, and then after a lady is your wife, then holding to her, cleaving her, and loving her, being close, he flips the whole thing upside down. And then, you can read about all the rest of it, but of course Dinah's brothers are not excited about this, what happened to their sister being defiled. So they come up with this big thing of, we'll let you have our sister and the daughter. You get circumcised and our stuff is yours. We'll all have everything together and we're all going to be happy. We're going to have a early Acts 5. We're going to have all things come. And he's like, sure enough. So they get circumcised and they're, okay, we'll get all these goodies coming. And as they're sitting there, they're being plotted against, and here comes the brothers of Dinah, and they whap them all down and slay them all as they're all sore and they couldn't fight. And you think, how did this start? Someone wasn't guiding where their daughter went, and it just spread out into just horrible stuff. So anyway, I look at this and you say, what is God's plan? When you look at young men to be encouraged to be sober-minded, if a father can't control his hands, if a father can't control his eyes, if a father can't control what comes out of his mouth, how he guards his time, how is the next generation going to say, here I am, I've been fortified by watching this great godly example. Now, we do see that with Josiah. Josiah, and hopefully we can see a living epistle there too. But you look at, he was surrounded with darkness and depravity, and all of a sudden he pops up with wisdom from God and starts doing right. That is not the norm. You're not going to see hundreds of examples of that in the scripture. There's very, very few. They're seldom in there. But when you think about this, claving unto Dinah, we need to be very careful what examples that we've led. And ideally, if you're young, you haven't made mistakes. So many people, I wish when I was meeting my wife or getting to know a gal, yeah, I did things, I'm embarrassed, I've done things I'm not proud of. Well, we shouldn't be proud of anything we're doing from the start. But anyway, when people do things, yeah, I was in a compromised situation, and yeah, I just walked after the flesh. We can learn from these examples. Learn. This thing here can be guided by the Spirit of God. Instead of letting sin reign in our mortal bodies, like Brother Barney mentioned, grace can reign and it can say, hey, son, here's the direction to go. This is the way, walk ye in it when you turn to the right hand or to the left. This guidance from this book can and will direct our path when we yield to it. So anyway, when I see this kind of stuff, this holding and embracing, what did it do? It led toward the wrong direction. So, of course, I'll mention a little bit more of that tonight regarding the relations and stuff. But when I see these things, I can't help but bring it up a little bit. So, about this thing about cleaving. Is anyone familiar with 1 Corinthians 7:1? You probably read through there. But it is good. It is a very good thing not to go embrace. When you're a young man, going embracing other young women, those are going to be someone else's husband someday, perhaps. And you remember what Susie felt like and what Darlene's hair, I'm trying to think of names that aren't here. But you remember holding these different gals, and then you're holding your wife, and you have these memories coming back from these other gals. No, the best thing to do, possess your vessel in sanctification and honor. And those younger women, it says to treat the elder women as mothers and the younger women as sisters with all what? Ooh. Growing up, did I go fondle my sister and I'm doing? No. If I did, someone needs to give me a black eye and knock me on the ground. That is wrong behavior. And to do that same thing with a godly young lady, in Corinthians, it says there's a difference between a wife, and a virgin. And if you're treating a virgin like a wife, shame on you. And if I had a mirror right in front of me, I would say the same thing to myself. But keeping yourself pure, if you're treating God defined, He's the one that came up with marriage. And the hormones that a husband and wife produce by intimate being close to each other, those are things that if they're tapped in by someone that's not married, it's a theft. It's something that should never be tapped into. When people go and embrace and do these kind of things, your bodies, God created them for being husband and wife together. They start generating hormones and emotions, and you're making bonds that are only supposed to be for a husband and wife. And when we go and do those things, but I like it. Did not check him like what he did. How about David when he's, it's the time when kings go forth to battle. He wasn't doing what he's supposed to. He wasn't in his right place. He looks over and sees Bathsheba and he goes, ooh, I got to watch No, he looks and then he goes and sends a message off to her. And then things happen that destroyed the nation, that destroyed his family. And instead of saying, like he learned, like Job, when he said, I made a covenant with mine eyes, why then should I think upon a maid? Men, husbands, it doesn't matter what age you are. I've talked to 90-year-old men, saints. And I says, hey, does youthful lust break off? Does it stop at 50? He goes, no, it's like a chameleon. It just follows you no matter what age you are. I was like, oh, well, I guess there's not a time where you can just rely on your flesh and say, I got this now. But God's word is what keeps us from that. But tapping into those hormones and things that God has preserved for a husband and wife, and if people are engaging that, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing a disservice to that next generation. The little children that see people doing husband and wife activity, and the little children say, that's contrary to what God's word says, and you're leaving a bad example. And I'm so thankful that I learned these principles young in life, because God's word can preserve you. And now the children say, hey, Daddy, were you and Mommy doing this with each other? No, by God's grace, we weren't. Were you and Mommy doing this and going off here and making provision for the flesh? No, because I know what this is capable of, and I know what it would like to do. And you know what? You wait until you have a husband and wife, and it's godly and right, and it's sanctified by the word of God in prayer. And even what Shechem did, if he lived to tell about it, which he didn't. But if he did, he could have learned that in Hebrews 13:4, marriage is honorable and all, the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. When you get your eyes and emotions revved up, it goes towards Hebrews 13:4. If you're married, it's honorable, and if not, it's something that you want to flee like the plague, because it is a way, and it comes against our members. So, I'll probably flesh that out a little bit more. But anyway, if it comes to things that we like, Why do you think the people were sacrificing their children to Moloch? They liked the wages of unrighteousness, like Judas. What wilt thou give me, and I'll betray the innocent blood? He knew he was betraying innocent blood, but give me a couple shekels. 30 shekels? Yeah, that sounds good. I'll betray that innocent blood. And what is your cost? Man, think about it. What cost if someone offered you something? What would you bow and give? When you think about the value of godliness, you think about a godly example. Is it worth one night of perversion? And now your example before everyone you know is defiled? Absolutely not. So we need to think about those things, and we need to possess our vessels in sanctification and honor, and to be able to allow that purity of God to be manifest. In Isaiah 28, we'll go over to there. Isaiah 28, and we'll look at verse number 7. Again, I can't stress enough, know this book, like Brother Adam mentioned. These things were written for our learning and admonition. What things? How Israel was tempted to lust, how they got out of that fallen, horrible condition. They got back serving their true and living God. We all can learn from those things, but deconstruct what brought them there and what brought them out. And you'll find it's the power of God's word every time. Isaiah 28, look at verse number 7. But they also have erred through wine, and through strong drink are out of the way. Now, has anyone here, have you ever heard of any family? I think it was, who was it that mentioned about a guy that he knew, cirrhosis of the liver finished him off? My two neighbors in Florida, on either side of me, 58 years old, they died a horrible, agonizing death with cirrhosis of the liver. Only 58 years old. Down they went in agony and pain and torment till they breathed their last breath. Why? Because wine took them. They took a little, it took them, and it took them farther than they ever thought. So again, I think I will mention a little bit about wine later on. But what do? Their judgment is skewed when they start taking in substances that affect their ability to think soberly and to be able to function properly. So what do? Their judgment is corrupted just like Lot's. And no doubt he had to have been engaging in some of that stuff, because after they fled, and you see the destruction of the city, I mean, it had to be immense, because Abraham even saw it. He saw that smoke ascending up to heaven. But when you look at what happened with that whole thing, Lot goes out. Where did they get that wine? I've never seen wine bottles growing on trees out in the wild. They must have brought it with them. So the younger women, Lot's daughter's like, hey, there's no man around here that we may have offspring. Let's have Lot, our dad, drink a bunch of wine, and then we'll be with child with him. You know what? They learned that kind of activity from Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't think they would have thought of that stuff on their own. But their entertainment, the things that they saw, how they conducted their lives and how they're interacting with others, these principles were instilled within the children of Lot and his whole family. And you know what? Sodom and Gomorrah, modern Sodom and Gomorrah, are very effective teachers. They use the eyes, they use the ears, they use movies with your emotions. It pulls right in, it links up to every part of you. It links up to your spirit, soul, and body in every aspect to push their agenda. And you know what the best way to protect yourself is? OFF, off. Boom, it loses its power, falls on the floor, and you say, get out of here, you wretched thing. And you know what? You can have the truth of God's word fortify you and bless you and your family and your future family. So I just love, you look at the dark, and there's a lot of dark, but there's a bright ray of hope, and it's from this book. Now, I don't have time at all to go into this one, but for godly examples, if you try taking Romans 13, 1 through 7, and think about it as a godly man and an assembly working and functioning in the will of God. When you look at attending continually upon this thing, and you look at those things that happen in Romans 13, Paul, that I see, did every single one of those things. The Corinthians were doing wrong. He says, in this I praise you not. But when they did well, he said, in this I praise you. And look at that thing. It has a dual application. But when you look at it, don't just say, oh, it's only government. Don't rob yourself. Look at that thing and say, how could I as a young man, how could I as a lady take some of those traits and allow the power that be of God to work through my members and bring order and to help others be in the will and pleasing of the Lord Jesus. All right, back to Genesis 19. I got to get going here. Genesis 19. And by far, this is just kind of flying over an elevated view of Genesis 19. But again, there's such a rich wealth of information in these things. Look at verse number 25. It says, and he overthrew those cities in all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities that grew upon, and all the inhabitants and that which grew upon the ground. But Lot's wife. Now, the angels told Lot and the whole family, don't look back. He told them, don't look back. I don't know what it would be like as a father. You have at least two daughters that stayed in Sodom. When he came and told his sons-in-laws, get you out, God's going to destroy the city. And they said, you're full of hot air. You seem as one that mocked. You're living this way, and now all of a sudden you claim to be concerned about this? You're a hypocrite. We don't want to hear anything you say. So they stayed, and Lot and his family and his wife, they're heading out. God pulled them out by his preserving hand. And I don't know the pain that would be knowing that at least two of your children, your own flesh and blood, are going to certain destruction. It's absolutely, they are going to be destroyed, and you know it. And you're heading out with what you've got left. How could you not think you'd want to look back and say, maybe they're following. Maybe they came to their senses, but they didn't. So, I mean, God told him not to look back, but from your heart, when you think of this, I don't know how you couldn't think, did they make it or did they not? So, anyway, but that even, I think maybe the reason that happened, even though Lot's wife was exposed to a lot of things, I think she still had that natural affection. And she thought, maybe they did maybe they're just 10 steps behind, but they weren't. So what's so important when you look at that and you say, as a father, as a mother, or a future father and mother, how can I make sure that I live an example of the believer so the children don't say, you're a hypocrite, I don't want anything to do with you or your God. I'm going to stay here and be unknowingly destroyed. I've never seen it before. I don't think it's going to happen. So we need to look at those principles and have that natural affection be so strong that we allow this book to change the way we think, the way we function, the way we behave, and who knows you as well as people you live with. Your children, we are those epistles known and read, and nobody knows us like our children know us. Well, of course, this book knows us better. It's a discerner of thoughts and intents of our heart. But to be able to be those men and those women that live lives that are pleasing to God, and when you do, not that you're ever going to not make a mistake, but when you do, you can tell the children, you know what? Daddy made a mistake here. God's word says this. I didn't follow it, and that's why I fell. And you know what that does? It takes the rebellious spirit of a child and it softens them. They go, you know what? Daddy is real. He has some of the same struggles I have, and I see how Daddy's getting the victory. I too want to get the victory. And it breaks down that barrier of, you do as I say. And then the child goes, but you're not doing as you say, and you want me to be. And it breeds that rebellion and hatred going on. So God wants them to be able to dwell together in unity. How good and how pleasant it is for a brethren to dwell in unity and have a family that's dwelling together in unity is something money cannot buy. You look at the guy that makes electric cars, Elon Musk. He's starting to learn things. He's getting a little bit older. His son, or whatever the thing is claiming to be now, got all sorts of crazy information in his head, and he goes, that was toxic. I wish I didn't do it, but it's too late. The destruction's already been done. If he would have taken his intellect and learned from this book, he could have avoided that altogether. So let that be a lesson to us. And if you have lives that got broken up and you have pieces of stuff, coming with humility and apologizing to maybe a wayward child and say, you know what? There were some ways that I was a hypocrite, and explain it to him instead of coming, when you're willing to lick my boots, I'm willing to have you come back. I don't see that working too well. But if you come and say, you know what? I did wrong here and here. I wasn't being faithful. I wasn't being vigilant. And I'm sorry for being that bad example to you. I think that'd go a whole lot farther than someone staying up here and say that kind of stuff. But anyway, so there's so much to learn in here, and it's very, very important information. So that thing about being known and read, 2 Corinthians 3:2, we are those things that are known and read, and saying and doing. Kind of like in 1 John, it says, my little children, let us not love in word or in tongue. What else is there? Word and tongue, what else? Deed and in truth. That's why this book can allow us to serve and worship God in deed and in truth, not just with words. because words can be very superficial and change with the times. All right, so the proper seeking of God is so important, and letting the word of Christ dwell in you richly, that's where it's at. Now, you don't have to go over there, but in Hosea 4:11, it says, whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. You think, well, new wine is found in a cluster. Nowhere that I know naturally occurring is alcohol. I mean, you got a fruit that'll rot in the ground. There's a little bit in that rotting piece of junk, but you don't see people say, ha ha, knock the wasps and the worm. That's just doesn't go through your mind. But alcohol, drinking alcohol, it's formulated by man. It's crafted, it's overwatched, it's guided with its temperature and manipulated by men. But when you think about whoredom, yeah, that can take away the heart. You see what happened with Shechem and David and all that kind of stuff. And then wine, and then new wine. But you know what? When it comes down new wine, what I'm thinking it could take away the heart, if you're making that and selling it, there's income. And you know what? Money can take away the heart as well. So we need to be very careful to be able to put money in the right ratio, in the right area and category, that there's things more important than money. But of course, money is important, caring for the things of your wife. So on dualism, you got to be balanced, because that false balance is an abomination in the sight of God. In verse 16 of chapter 19, you see Lot lingering. They told him, get thee out, and he lingered. You know what I see there? When you look at Eli, for instance, Eli, it said, was a very heavy man, and he didn't restrain his sons. So what did his sons do? They served after God and went far beyond what Eli did? They took Eli's problems and magnified them. They're lying with the women at the temple, taking people's food away. No, I'm going to just take it right now by force. And they were out of control because Eli restrained not his sons. Eli was very heavy, and when he heard about his sons dying, he fell off his chair back when his neck broke. And you look at that and you think, what could I learn from there? Laying aside every weight. And if there was a mirror, every one of us has the same temptation in the same areas. But laying aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, if you could lay aside, if it's possible to lay aside extra stuff that weighs you down, whether it be vices in life, whatever it may be, but also if you can get to be a position where you're carrying around less weight, it makes it easier to do things. It makes it easier to be vigilant. It makes it easier if something drops or you're going to help your wife with something, instead of being, I got to get all the way over to help her. I'll let her do it. Instead of being able to be fit to get over and help her out with stuff, being in a position where you're able, fit for the battle, like those men of David's mighty band. They were not of double heart, they were fit and they were skilled, and they went out and wrought the victory. But being as capable physically as you can never hurts to be able to be in the purpose of God. And even the Apostle Paul, he knew that. In 1 Corinthians 9:27, he said, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest at any time when I preach to others, I myself should be a castaway. So keeping those things in order, but not going to the ditch. You've got the ditch of Eli, and then you got the ditch of Absalom being lifted up with pride. You set up a mirror and, I like one, and I'm going to get a smaller shirt and maybe cut these things off, and that's not the way you want to go. The more of this stuff that's seen, it doesn't lead to good places. Shechem saw, and that's why we'll look at it later tonight, being shamefaced, we'll look at that definition, and chaste. Those are not the gals that people lust after. If there's two groups of gals, there's some Amish gals walking down one side, and there's some gals that barely have their secret parts covered with those aprons that Adam and Eve made. The lustful-eyed guys that can't control their lust, where are they going to look? They're going to be looking over there with their emotions getting all revved up. So anyway, the more we can cover this stuff up, and just for sake of defining nakedness, if you read Isaiah 47:3, the maid bare thigh, he says, thy nakedness shall be seen, and good things don't come of more of this body being seen. The best thing to do is adorn the gospel of Christ Jesus, where people see you and they see you subject to godly ordinances that God has in his word, and they start paying attention. Elia noticed that she was at some goat thing back when she was, 19 or so, and she had modest apparel on, and there was this guy that was just a typical heathen, and he saw her, and just by seeing her, the profanity stopped, and what he was talking about, innuendos of unsound air, it all stopped just by seeing, never even heard a word, just by seeing, and they go, oh. And right away there's respect for a lady, instead of acting in lustful and disgusting ways and being like animals and making weird calls and whistling. Those things are which, of course, you want to avoid. No. Those are the things that were happening down in Sodom and Gomorrah. All right. In Matthew 22:29, Jesus warned, he said, you do err not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. And the places I've made bad decisions is because I didn't know the scriptures and I wasn't willing to apply them. I know it. That's exactly how it happened, and it will happen every time until I learn. All right. So there's a value of eternity, and this world does not have that. All right. Now, this thing, in closing, we're going to go through some of those attacks. For husbands, what are some of the attacks that happen for husbands? One of the temptations could be to be lazy, not being diligent. How about being slothful in business? Cutting corners, and you know what? People start finding out, that guy doesn't keep his word. He claims to be a Christian, and he does this. That's not a good thing to have. We want to have our conversation among those people above reproach. And when you look at the qualifications of elder, bishop, and deacon, going through Titus and Timothy, look at those. As a young man, you might say, I'm only 8 years old. Look at those qualifications and look at them and start having some of those things be laid up in your inner man. And look and see, to be able to make right judgments, look at those and allow them to be formed within you. And you remember back in Ezekiel 22, when God sought for a man to stand in the gap, and there was none. There was no men that were fit and ready for the battle. There was none there. And I think I mentioned it before about the example of a nation that's cursed. Women or children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. What is it? Just like Brother Adam mentioned, it's supposed to be God directing to the godly man for the guidance of the family, and that subjected role underneath. Men and women see that today, and they go, I haven't seen that for a long time. It's like, I was preaching one time downtown Minneapolis. I hopped up on a power transformer, and a guy about 70 years old comes by with his grandchildren, and I stopped to drink some water or something so I could hear him. He tells his little children, that man is preaching the gospel, street preaching. They used to do that years ago. Yeah, it did used to happen years ago, but it needs to be sounding true. That young man remembers from 60 years ago or so. He remembers someone standing out saying, thus saith the Lord. And you know what it rings true in people's minds today? People who are living epistles and are able to say, thus saith the Lord, and living a blameless life, that is powerful. And lost people go, he had an atrocity in his family, and he's getting through. He's not trying to drown his sorrows and trying to find comfort in the Southern Comfort or some of those kind of things. He's able to have that comfort who comforteth us in all our tribulations, and we are being watched. We're being judged literally by everyone around us. So it's good to keep those things in mind. But leading and guiding for a man, to love his wife, give himself for her as Christ loved the church, like Brother Adam mentioned, that's where it's at. But to be able to guide, lead, rule, Abram was able to rule. God knew that he was commanding his home correctly, and off he went. He was able to perform a battle and win. And that's why together as families, everyone needs to read the scripture together, study as a family, powerful. Children will have an insight that you never thought about. Like that one I was thinking of, that when Jesus handed the sop to Judas, S-O-P, he was the son of perdition. And just that acronym, some children might see that and they're like, wait, like that, and you think, It's like I was explaining to my oldest daughter about the Eucharist. And I was telling her how high money equals high mass, low money equals low mass, and no money is no mass. She goes, oh, the Eucharist. And I thought, what? That was fast. I was like, the Eucharist. I was like, I never heard that term in my life, but that's what happens. Children start getting God's word in there, and stuff comes out of them that just is a joy. It's wonderful. Or you get the opposite, and it's not good. So anyway, but it's exciting, and it's wonderful to have God's word where you submit yourself to it, and the grace of God rules in your life, and things work according to God's plan. And if you have trouble, which you're going to, you're able to have that comfort in it. All right, so there's that closeness to God that Abraham had. He had that closeness, and he was associated with that. And Lot, he wasn't paying attention. He wasn't being long viewed. He was having this short-term memory and short vision, and down he went. If you remember, we won't go over there, but when Jezebel's husband, Ahab, he goes and sees this vineyard. He says, oh, that is a nice vineyard. I want that. He goes, hey, you know what? I don't have my billfold on me. He says, you name your, and he says, no, I'm not going to sell it. What? I'll give you more than it's worth. No, it's his inheritance. It's that vineyard. No, it's not for sale. I'll give you better vineyards and more. No, it's not for sale. So Ahab goes back and he's all sad. And Jezebel says, why are you so down? He tells her, and she goes right away. She has a plan. I know. We're going to have some people lie about him. I'll take your imprimatur and say, he blasphemed God and the king. We'll stone him, put him to death, and you can inherit his land. But you know what? That Naboth, he knew that what he had, sure, he could have had money and other things, but it was the inheritance that he had from God, and it's not for sale. I'm not going to give you even half of it. I don't care how much of it. It's not for sale. Is that what Esau learned? No. Oh, yeah, here. Give me that bowl of beans. Yeah. Oh, pottage. Oh, yes. That's what I want. Are you insane? But what happened? The blood of Naboth flowed. He had a conviction and he held to it till his blood drained out of his body. And what a great example that is. And men, we need to look at people like that and say, why did that guy not give in? Why is it that those people, why is it that Joseph, when no one else was around and Potiphar's wife grabs him, she says, lie with me. No one else is there looking. You could just go along with it. She'd speak highly of you. You get rewarded. You maybe rise to the place and position of the kingdom higher than you ever thought you would. He said, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And he took off. And you know what? God used him such a way that he was able to save much people alive by his activity. If he would have bowed and given, his family would have just starved out and they would have had the provisions from God. And all those things, again, where do we learn those, understand? Where do we get those examples from God's word? Know this book, and it will guide and direct. All right, so being subject and that trickle-down authority goes from God down to the men. And I just love Brother Adam's message. I need to listen to it again, maybe put it on slow. Because that's what it comes down to. It's God's order. And his order, there's nothing superior to it. Young men, what is it young men can learn? Exhort young men to be what? Sober-minded. What will that do? They'll realize, you know what? I'm just not in this world to do what I feel and do a bunch of lunacy and be a gamer. What do you do? Oh, I'm a gamer, a professional gamer. No, the goal is, you know what? To be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. To be able to take these spiritual tools and physical tools, know how to use both of them so you can provide spiritual meat and provisions for yourself and have a surplus that you can sustain a family with physical and also spiritual information and material. Now, I'll go through more about the young men and ladies. For young ladies, you know what young ladies really need? They are looking. And young ladies, they look at how other young ladies are dressed, and that person has whatever clothes in their hairdo or whatever. They got the round tire like the moon, and they got their wimping pins like Isaiah 5. It talks about that. That gal must have been quite the sight. She was really decked out. But gals look at other gals. They look at the older women and they say, huh. And you know what? Examples teach. And they teach good and they teach in the direction you don't want to go. So it's good for aged ladies to be able to realize you are on display and those younger ladies are looking. And if you're trying to hike up more here, trying to do squeezy stuff here and there, those younger girls are like, that's what I want to be like. And you know what? I'm going to go a couple steps farther and I'm going to go a little. And before you know it, the aged women say, oh, I wish I didn't go that direction. That example, that lady back in like the early 1900s, she was real good at swimming. She was on some beach in New York, and she had a suit that was from her wrist all the way to her ankles, but it was tight. And the people of the day said, oh, that is wrong. They grabbed her and they gave her like indecent exposure fine or something. And she fought it and argued about it and went to court. And finally, I think it was dropped. Or it was over, whatever the rule was, they overthrew it. So she thought, good, she got her way. But little did she know, 10 or 20 years later, it didn't just stop there. Gal started pulling off more clothes, and she goes, that's too far. And she was the one that started it. And in her own mind, in her heart, she lamented that she went that direction of rebellion. And I've got this looking by, I'm going to show it off. And it was a backfire, and it damaged so many people, and it undermined this country. And one of the reasons we're in the position that we're in now is because of that. So looking at those examples, make sure that we keep those things in perspective. So loving your wives, loving the husbands, children, all those things are so important, but letting this book richly dwell in you, because whether you're a young man, young lady, aged man, or aged woman, you'll get information specific to your chapter in life that will give you guidance beyond what any of your peers will be able to have for understanding and direction. And all right, so getting to the conclusion here. Strife and divisions among families, it's exactly what Satan wants. He wants the father to be about the mother, and the mother all up in arms about this, and the children biting and devouring one another. And where do those divisions come? In 1 Corinthians 3:3, they come because you're yet carnal and walk as men. Walking in the Spirit and you don't fulfill the lust of the flesh. That's where the solution is. And that verse about how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity, Psalm 133:1. So in conclusion, families need to strengthen. They need to look around and say, there's danger out here. This book tells us, it identifies it. As you're walking around with your children and they're younger, or even when they're older, they can say, look, there's a destructive influence. Here's a positive influence. And from a young age, young women, young little girls should be able to say, hey, there's an example of a Psalm 1:1 man. He doesn't walk in the counsel of the ungodly. He doesn't stand in the way of sinners. He doesn't sit in the seat of the scornful like Lot did, sitting in the seat of the gate with the scornful. And down went his whole family into destruction and misery. So, again, you cannot ever go overboard on understanding this book. Give yourself to it wholly. Just like a drunk, they give themselves wholly to that stuff. It's destroying them till they die of cirrhosis of the liver. They gave themselves wholly to it, and what they get? Death. You give yourself wholly to this book, and what do you get? Life now, like Brother Larry mentioned, and life that is to come. And it's a life of joy and bliss, and you are going to have up and downs, but you get a comfort and be able to suffer persecution. And if we get to the position like Paul, I was reading how he was all about pleasure. And I thought, pleasure, how Americans, we're for pleasure. We're going to Hawaii, or we're going to wherever. We're going to Disney World for our pleasure. Paul was all about pleasure too. But the pleasure he had with a close relationship to God, he says, I take pleasure in infirmities and persecutions. And you think, that's a position of understanding. He went from a young man, a child, a babe, to Paul the aged, where he could able to say, those persecutions and trials, they work for a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. They're more precious than gold that perisheth. And if we can have the words of God's mouth like Job, he esteemed the words of God's mouth more than his necessary food. And what did it do? It strengthened and built him up where he lost everything, well, except his wife. And his wife says, curse God and die. That was the counsel from his helpmeet that he was one with, and she said, just curse God and die. And what sustained him? He said, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. He said, should we receive good at the hand of God and not evil? He said, naked came I into this world, naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all these, it says, Job sinned not, neither charged God foolishly. Through that dark time of trouble, tribulation, and persecution, then his friends show up. That's a whole nother persecution thing. We're here to help you. But what happens? They come out the other side, and he was blessed, and that vigilant that the other people he put on display, the glory of God and the understanding and wisdom of that Job had, came through, and God ultimately got the glory at that day, and he still gets glory from it thousands of years later. So again, I need to encourage myself, remind myself daily, seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. Give yourself wholly to it, and it is profitable to all things, this life and that which is to come. So I probably went way over time, but anyway, thank you for your attention. And these things, I don't think you can cover them enough. It's those things that stirring up the pure minds by way of remembrance, it's very important. And attending continually upon this very thing is so important. So, all right, well, I'm just going to close in with a word of prayer, and I guess we're going to get ready to eat some necessary food or some convenient food. So, all right, Lord Jesus, we sure do thank you for the wisdom that you've given us. We thank you for these examples of men in the Old Testament, time past, and even now. We thank you for living epistles, and may your word be written on the table of our heart when we make decisions, when we make judgments. Ideally, as we walk around, the way we conduct ourselves, our conversation and manner of life brings glory, honor, and praise to the Lamb who died for us. Thank you so much for redeeming us from all iniquity. and purifying unto yourself a peculiar people zealous of good works. And may we allow the word of Christ to dwell in us and allow us to function as you would have us function in this present world and shine as bright, bright lights for your glory, praise, and honor all the days of our life.